Before you create a new file in FileMaker, it's important to consider naming conventions for scripts, fields, tables, table occurrences, value lists, layouts, and even files. So that's where we're starting before we actually create a new FileMaker file. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the subject, but I am providing this file with multiple references in it that we'll briefly go over. Of course, I'll teach you the basics as we're going through the video, and you'll see that in the next one. We'll start with the naming for the file and the fields and the tables. But conventions are deep. You need to learn them, and not everybody has the same naming convention. You have to get something that works for you, is consistent, is compatible with all the third-party software that's out there that FileMaker might communicate with. So be careful with this. I'll give you the basics, but I would recommend at the very least reading this main document here. This is the first, as far as I know, FileMaker developer conventions. It's was done back in 2005. You'll see here. It's still valid today. There's a few things added that are not in there that you need to add, but you'll see that a bunch of people got together and decided to put this. You see a bunch of companies here. They all got together and decided what a good standard naming conventions was. And you'll see files, table naming, field naming, table occurrences, everything's in here as you scroll through it. And you'll come into files here. Let's get down to fields, which is really probably the most important one and the one that people are aware of. And you'll see that we didn't quite get there. Let's see, it's quite a ways down here. Ancillary, there we go. Well, table naming is good too. And it's kind of the same thing. They give you a bunch of different choices in here, such as what letters and numbers and things can be used, whether you want to do lower camel case, upper camel case. I personally use lowercase with underscores, so it looks something like that, but not for my table names. I actually do my table names like this in all uppercase, and I'll explain why I do that. But it's important for you to decide what is the best approach for yourself and to be consistent. That's the key. In a single solution, be consistent so when you come back 6 months later or somebody else needs to look at it, they can understand what you're doing because everything's consistent. It's also important because you need to be compatible with things like, let's say, SQL. I do a lot of execute SQL right inside of FileMaker because it's very efficient as far as certain tasks that we need to do. Now, there's some other articles here. You'll see two by me at the Philosophy of FileMaker. Easy naming conventions, naming standards. Here's a whole website devoted to coding standards. Core Solutions has one and updates it regularly. DB Services has one. FileMaker Today has an article on it. The support group has styles or theme conventions. That's a little bit different. As we get down here, they're a little bit different. ClickWorks has naming conventions. Skeleton Key has SQL naming conventions. Like I said, it's pretty important if you want to do execute SQL inside of FileMaker. And then we have one last one. I try to include as many as I can find on the web, and sometimes the websites go away or they don't update it. But these ones are pretty. You can feel pretty safe with these. So you'll wonder why we have an actual database in here, because this file actually teach a little bit, if you go into manage database, about how naming conventions work, or at least the way I view them. And so you can use this as a basic starting point. And there'll be some help information up here as well, so you can read that. I'd highly recommend coming to this file, looking at it, possibly reading this entire one here. This is the one that's not published anymore. I just happen to have a copy and are letting you have it here. And if you want to take it out, you can just drag it out of this container field here. But this is a good one to start with. At least read it, understand what you need to do as far as name conventions, or at least understand that you need to be consistent and then get something to be consistent with. So hopefully this helps you, give you the basics, study this, but we'll get into the bare minimum when we go to the next video.